Welcome to God, Guns, and Cars. Obviously, God first. Guns and cars are amazing things to have fun with, but today I want to focus on who God is and what He's done for me. I don't want to talk about myself because I am great or I've accomplished many things. I want to talk about just what God has done in my life because I owe Him that much, and hopefully this will help one of you guys out. So I want to talk about how I started out in life. I grew up in Southern California, in San Diego area, and my mom was a struggling mom. She's trying to survive, and she decided it would be a good idea to start selling drugs. At first to make ends meet, and then obviously the money came in faster than she had expected, and she started to like the whole idea of having money all the time, and then her habit became worse, and she got busted crossing the U.S.-Mexico border with a bunch of drugs, and she was arrested. That wasn't the first time she was arrested. That was not the last time she was arrested. In fact, she spent most of my childhood in and out of prison. And why is that important? Yes, a lot of people have parents that have been in jail. It's important because the guy that she was married to was not my dad. He was my stepfather. I didn't know that until I was about 7 or 8 years old, but that didn't stop him from claiming to be my dad, and that he was the only dad that I knew. And why that's significant is because my stepdad was a drug addict and he was an alcoholic, and he was also a 4th-degree black belt. And at times, I'd say most of the time, he used that on my brother and I, and then later on my younger brother and my sister. He would get drunk or be high on something, and I had a little afro when I was growing up, and he liked to drag me around the house by my hair if I didn't listen the way he wanted to. And one of the times my mom went to a prison she was gone for a few years. It was just him taking care of us, and we were on welfare. He was using the welfare money to buy drugs and alcohol. Decided he didn't want to pay the rent anymore. He didn't buy food. We had some guy that drove around a little truck that sold rotten food out of the back of his truck that he got from supermarkets that threw it away. We'd buy big, huge bags of potatoes, and they were like 50 cents for a bag. So we'd get like 25 pounds of potatoes for 50 cents, cut off the bad parts and cook them. And that's what we ate for a long time. I've had potatoes any way you can possibly imagine. It's kind of like Forrest Gump. Shrimp gumbo, shrimp kebabs, those types of things. Well, I've had potatoes every possible way you can imagine. Anyways, as I was growing up in this environment, my stepfather thought it was funny to try to provoke me to anger. And he used to sit on my chest and slap me in the face repeatedly. And he did this to no end. As I grew up, I became more and more angry and more violent. When I was about 11 years old, my stepfather had stopped paying the rent because he had decided to use the money on other things, such as drugs, alcohol, and women, or whatever he was doing at the time while my mom was in prison. And he decided that it was a good idea to not pay the rent. And in doing so, I guess he had received several eviction notices. I didn't really know what was going on. I was a kid. And during that time, he was oblivious. He didn't tell anybody anything that was going on. We didn't know there was an eviction notice. The U.S. Marshals showed up at our house. And the U.S. Marshals told us we had 5 minutes to gather the things that we wanted out of our house and get out. And they were going to lock the doors, and if we got caught trespassing, we were going to go to prison. Or excuse me, we would get arrested. Obviously, we were kids. That wasn't really going to happen. But the whole thing is that the U.S. Marshals came in and kicked us out. My uncle, who came and got us, came and helped us, and he took us to our grandparents' house. And our grandparents were Christians, They raised my mom in a good home. My grandparents were hardworking. My grandmother worked for the school district. My grandfather uh, did odd jobs and did whatever he had to do legally to take care of his family, and he always did, and they never went without. So we ended up living with my grandparents. And as time went on, I got in more and more trouble. I grew more and more violent. I rejected everything that was around me because I was full of anger and hate, and I didn't know what to do with all that anger and hate. And so I got involved in gangs. And with the gangs, I started doing things and hurting people because I thought it was the best thing for me. I didn't care about who it affected. I was full of anger and hate, and I didn't know how I was going to make it in life. When I was about 14 years old, my older brother and I got into a large fight over a stupid TV show. I got up in the morning to watch a movie, and he got up and he turned the channel because he wanted to watch videos on MTV when that was a thing. And during that time, he broke my nose. I grabbed a steak knife and I stabbed him. He didn't die. I just barely poked him with it. But my intent was to hurt him. And once the anger subsided and all that stuff got set aside, I realized that I had a problem. I had a problem with my anger and with hurting people. And so what I decided to do was try to get out of the area. I thought of everything I could do. I knew that I needed to change. I knew that what was happening to me and those around me was not good. My friends were dying and going to prison. I have a friend of mine doing 2 consecutive life sentences for stabbing somebody. So I knew that's not what I wanted for my life. I was smarter than that. And I decided that, I was going to contact my dad, and not my stepdad, my actual real dad. He lived in Washington State, and I kept contact with him off and on. Didn't really speak to him very much. But when I was 14, I made that decision. I was going to contact my dad and try to go and get out of San Diego. So that's what I did. I contacted my dad. My dad said was absolutely sure. Come on up. And that was in November. And when I got to Washington, my dad was driving me back to the house, and on the way home, he was like, "Hey, I want you to understand, in this house we go to church." I'm like, "That's great. Have fun with that." He's like, No. You're part of this house now. You're going to go to church." I was like, "No, I don't think that's going to be the thing. I'm not going to church." But I did. I went to church, and my first day at church was a Wednesday night. They had a youth group, and I was the bad boy and the newcomer to a small town in Washington State. And I got asked out by like 4 different girls the first night that I was there. I said, I think this could work. And I started getting involved because I liked girls. And I made some friends, and I continued to have the same anger problems.